Namaskar. In this episode of Dil Se, we'll be talking about a very interesting subject, namely the Election Commission of India. So let me start off, Qureshi Saab, with your comments on what do you mean by superintendent's direction and control under Article 324 of the Constitution?
The courts have repeatedly said that this means everything about elections is the responsibility and the right of the Election Commission of India. Everything means everything. And in fact, there is one judgment which says that if a situation arises about which there is no law, no precedent, he will not pray to God for guidance. He has all the power inherent in Article 324 and he will use it independently. So that's a reservoir of power which is available to the Election Commission, which it has used occasionally, quite frequently actually. It is like our nuclear power. Okay. But we can't use it on a daily basis, but when we have to, we do.
Now that's very important. In other words, you control the affairs of a state in the sense while the election process is on, right?
That's right. And I think I'll add to what Dr. Qureshi has said, that Election Commission is like an umpire who has yellow and red cards in his pocket. But he is not expected to be confined only to using that, because if the situation so warrants, it can invoke its extraordinary powers and intervene if it feels that the elections are not free and fair. So I think that is the additional responsibility on the Election Commission, which gives rise to heightened expectations on the part of the people, that here is a person who will not only supervise, but if the situation so demands, then it can take some measures which could be unprecedented.
That's very interesting. When you talked about free and fair elections, that's a phrase which is not used in 324, but the Supreme Court has said that free and fair elections are the basic structure of the Constitution, right? Without the election being free and without the election being fair, you have no democracy. So what do you mean by freedom and what do you mean by fairness, General?
See, one is that the voter should have absolute freedom to vote to whoever he wishes to, as per the laid down thing. There should be no repression or no, you hear so many cases that people are not allowed to go and vote only.
Yes.
Those type of things also happen. The other thing is, as far as the electoral rolls goes, that's a very important thing. If there is some misappropriation in the electoral rolls, the elections are lost even before they are held.
Right.
And we have seen cases like in Mumbai and other places it happened, lakhs of names disappearing just before the voting day. And what can the people do? They can just wring their hands and they say, sorry.
They bring their Aadhaar card and people say, well, your name is not there.
You can't vote.
It doesn't really matter whether your Aadhaar card is there or not. This is what happens.
So that is the second part. Now, coming to the part of the actual voting and counting of votes. The voter and the common man and the political parties, everybody has to be sure that the counting is above board, that the results which are announced are final. Why I'm saying this is because in 2019, after the elections, when ADR filed a PIL about the discrepancies which were found in the number of votes which were polled and the votes which were counted, the Election Commission said these are not final results. So then we raised the question, then why are you announcing them?
Correct.
They said that we wait for a few days for the final results. So what is the big hurry? So that is the other part, that once the voting has taken place. And similarly, the political parties have the full right to, when they are doing the campaigns, they should get full liberty to campaign in the proper way. And that is where the role of the Model Code of Conduct's implementation comes. Now, if there are certain people who are making certain types of speeches which are prohibited and they are not rapped on the knuckle, but others, for a small thing, they are rapped. So that is where the free and fairness part comes.
Yes.
So these are some of these thoughts.
Well, let me ask. I have noticed personally, I may be dead wrong, that somehow the bureaucracy in this country who serve the government seem to be involved in the political processes of the government. This is my impression. I may be dead wrong. And I say that why? Because in October 2023, there was a concept of what are called Rath Prabharis. The bureaucracy was asked to be Rath Prabharis to propagate what the government has achieved during its term. They were later renamed as nodal officers. And the army, and I'm talking about again in November to 20th November 23 to January 25, 24, the army, members of the army were made soldier ambassadors, again to propagate what the government has achieved. Now, in the context of the Election Commission, do you think that that's fair and reasonable? And should the bureaucracy at all be involved in political processes?
Well, it is true that some bureaucrats get involved in politics in the normal time, but the challenge for the Election Commission is to identify such people, and we have them on our radar all the time. When we are preparing for the election, we identify these people, we remove them, and we have a policy of transferring them. Anybody who has been on a post for the 3 years has to go, whatever be his or her qualification.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm talking about the decision of the government to have bureaucrats as prabharis.
No, I'm coming to that. And I started with that. In the normal time, bureaucrats getting politicized is fairly possible and maybe even common. But when it comes to the election, we isolate them. For instance, there was a case when we transferred the Chief Secretary and Home Secretary and DGP of the state of UP at the same time. Why? Interestingly, the complaint was against the Chief Secretary that he attended a political meeting. And he said, I've never seen as good a Chief Minister. So we called him. He said, if you are so much in love with the Chief Minister, go and press his legs. We'll have our own, we'll have our new Chief Secretary. So the fact that we are conscious of it and we isolate such people, that's our normal routine.
Right.
But I think one needs to look at this from a historic perspective. And I think the perception that has developed in this country is that because, let's say, the civil services was a continuation from pre-independence times. So a lot of political parties in the country started associating the bureaucracy with the ruling party.
Right.
And because of the fact that you had one regime running for so many decades, I think the association became entrenched.
Right.
So part of the issue is the perception created by political parties that bureaucracy willy-nilly is hand in glove, not hand in hand with the government. And I think that perception needs to break because not only by the political parties, but it has to break by the conduct of the civil services also. So it is very much up to the civil services to assert their neutrality.
That's a tall order. That's not going to happen, Devara sir. That's not going to happen. If the policy of the government is to appoint bureaucrats as Rath Prabharis and army people as soldier ambassadors, the Election Commission, in my understanding, under the Constitution, should have immediately interfered and told the government you can't do that. But they chose not to do so.
In a normal situation, I don't think Election Commission has any role to play. And it is also a fact that government servants, whatever be the capacity in which they work, they do propagate government schemes. Right? But the extent to which you go, I think that is where the controversy arises. So I would feel that as far as this discussion is concerned, we have to observe the conduct of civil services during the process of conducting
I understand that. Yeah, but doesn't, I mean, I understand that during the process you are in charge of superintendence, direction and control, but the Election Commission is also a constitutional body.
Kapil, if I may add, answering your question, that these Prabharis you are talking about, they're always on Election Commission's radar, even when we are not officially in the
Exactly,
picture.
exactly.
Yes, and I'm very sure, I'll be unhappy to be proved wrong, that all these Prabharis would not have been given election duty.
Yes.
And since your program will be heard, there were some people can confirm or deny this feeling that I have.
Yeah, no, but the point is that Election Commission should advise, because you are politicizing politicizing the bureaucracy, and Election Commission also, in the ultimate analysis, is a body which can advise the government that this should not happen.
I don't know if it is a counselor in all times to the political.
Not all times, but it can at least.
But that's what I think Mr. Qureshi is pointing out, that as far as that interferes in the process of a free and fair conduct of elections,
Right.
I think Election Commission does keep a watch, and they're expected to keep a watch.
What are your views on that?
My feeling is that firstly, this direction by the government was given much before the elections.
Yes, that's true.
It started in November, December.
Correct.
And this is a direction given to a government servant, which he cannot ignore.
Yes.
But of course, as far as the defense forces go, the ex-servicemen and the retired officers, they raised a big hue and cry about this, after which I think the government backtracked. But as far as the bureaucrats go, I think it was implemented.
Yes, it was.
So the issue is that there are so many other ways to broadcast your achievements.
Correct.
The media is there. I mean, before the elections, we've seen full-page advertisements every day, and every 10 minutes on the radio there is a jingle about various things, which we all know. And then, of course, there is a social media and various other ways to do it. So why ask the government servants to do this?
And
I
this is
personally
just before
feel-
the election. I mean, November, December
No,
23.
the intention is very clear. It is that we want to, give our achievements in front of the common people. That's fine. But then, why employ government servants? Use your politicians. Use your karyakartas.
That's the whole political parties are meant to do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on to something far more serious than that. This was before the election. Now, in the midst of election, you have the weaponization of the Enforcement Directorate and the tax authorities. And you have seen that after the 16th of March, when the election was scheduled, was announced, there's this ED raids taking place, income tax notices being given. Now, is this normal?
Well, it is not. Enforcement agencies keep doing their job all the time. But Ashok and I both have written articles on the subject, and have said that anything which interferes with free and fair election commission has to step in, which, as you rightly said, it has been regarded as a basic structure. Now, these frequent raids, if they are interfering in free and fair elections, election commission has to step in. And the fact that in 2019, which was a notorious year for the election commission, even then they issued directions to these agencies to keep off and postpone their activities. In my article in the Indian Express, I made it very clear that we have a formula that anything that can wait must wait. Now, something which has been going on for 1 year, 2 years, the investigation, 8 times he did not appear, doesn't matter. He keep him out for another 2 months. Wait till the end of the election. And the formula that we follow, will heavens fall if it is postponed.
Correct.
And I have said the election, the heavens would not have fallen, and we have to see whether if it is a case of a terrorist, we don't interfere because terrorists may run away.
Correct.
Now, will they postponing the things, the arrest of the 2 leaders and freezing the accounts? Could they not have waited for 2 months?
Exactly.
And would heavens have fallen? And on the contrary, irreparable damage is being done to the other 2 parties. Now they cannot campaign. You realize the importance of the campaign.
Therefore, the election is neither free nor fair.
Neither free nor fair. You see the top leaders are campaigning all the time. How important is their campaign? You stop them from campaigning for a day and see what happens. Therefore, now you are officially you are asking them not to campaign and freezing the funds. Then I raised my voice against it in that article, and I stand by it.
I know, I read it, but let me give for the viewers some data, I think, which is very important. The schedule of elections were announced on 16th of March. On 21st of March, Arvind Kejriwal was arrested. No reason to do that. And the Election Commission never said a word. On March 23, the Enforcement Directorate conducted raid on the premises of Gulab Singh Yadav, who represents a constituency in Delhi. On this March 27, Enforcement Directorate raids various sites, including AAP leader Deepak Singla in Delhi. On March 28, ED questions Punjab Excise Department officials and Aam Aadmi Party Goa convener Amit Palekar and 3 party leaders on the excise policy in Goa. On March 30th, ED questions Delhi Transport and Law Minister Kailash Gehlot for 5 hours. On April 2, Enforcement Directorate filed a money laundering case against TMC leader Mahua Moitra. On March 21, 2024, Enforcement Directorate carried raids in Anna DMK leader Swaroop Biswas. On March 15, 2024, raid on Lok Sabha candidate Amol Kirtikar of Uddhav Group. Now, this is what is happening after March 16. And why did the Election Commission not interfere, sir?
So, let me just, maybe I'll take some time, but explain the landscape within which things happen. So, what has happened on 16th of March? The only thing which has happened is that the Model Code of Conduct has come into being, which empowers the Election Commission, obliges the Election Commission to intervene. But if you see the construct of the Model Code, it does not cover the law enforcement agencies or the courts for that matter. The dilemma is that despite the design of the Model Code of Conduct, the Election Commission can invoke its authority. This is what we discussed just now. Now, there are 2 precepts. One is that the Election Commission would always respond to a complaint.
Right.
It does not take suo motu action. And there are good reasons why it doesn't take suo motu action, because it might be accused of being selective in its approach. So therefore, the principle that they adopt is that we will respond to a complaint. Now, in cases where there are quasi-judicial authorities, there are precedents, and that is why I said that they are in a very unenviable position of having a reservoir of power which they can utilize. And let me cite, in 2009, the Election Commission did issue an advisory which said that even the Electricity Regulatory Commission, which is a statutory authority, and it works under an act, their decisions are covered under the Model Code of Conduct. So that was one. The other is that because on the presentation of the budget, you would know that there is no concept.
Correct.
Right? But the Election Commission did advise the government that this is the practice which is followed, that in an election year, the government does not present a full budget. So they issued an advisory of this nature. So there are 2 instances, one in which they were specific that the decisions of the statutory authority are covered under the Model Code. The other was an advisory issued to the sovereign. But let's take a third case of 2019. You know, there was a biopic which was made.
Yes.
And people went to the court asking the Supreme Court to stop that biopic from being released. Supreme Court said this is in the jurisdiction of the Election Commission.
Correct.
And there again, after examining all the facts and circumstances, the Election Commission came to the conclusion, actually ordered that biopic of that nature, specifically this, but then many others, should not be released during the election period. So the point that I'm making is that, yes, if there are unprecedented events that have taken place, such that you have cited, it does call for Election Commission to examine what's going on, and then they can come to their conclusion.
Well, let me just broaden the discussion, because I have a different point of view. Maybe you agree or not agree. You talked about the Model Code of Conduct. The Model Code of Conduct is just a Model Code of Conduct. The reservoir of power, as Yaqub Bhai said, is in Article 324. So the Model Code of Conduct does not prevent the Election Commission acting under 324 to actually tell the government any major decisions that are likely, by any of your authorities, that are likely to disturb the level playing field, first come to us before those decisions are implemented. They are not functioning under you, but they are in an election schedule. In the course of that schedule, you are the controlling authority of the election. That's 324. Why should you be constrained by the Model Code of Conduct? General, what's your view?
See, my view is that 2 points I'll make. One is that I do hold no brief for a particular party. I mean, all parties are the same as far as we are
I'm also an independent member of Parliament.
So one point is that, okay, few years back, one had not even heard of ED. They do their work, they used to do it quietly.
Right.
Nowadays, every day the ED is in the news because of the action they are taking against various politicians. The point is that there are so many other politicians who got cases going on against them. But those are shelved, or they are not being, and they are roaming around freely and they are doing their job as canvassing.
There, of course, the
and
Election Commission can't do a thing about it.
So, yeah. So, no, my point is, if this action is just, then there should be other people also being, interrogated or put behind bars or whatever. And the second thing, I want to just quote this letter of Mr. E.S. Prasanna, the former secretary. And I find that logic quite good, coming to this Article 324 thing. If the Election Commission has that type of powers, he has recommended that in future, seeing what is going on now, why can't these agencies like the CBI and the ED and the security forces also, which are deployed for the elections, come under the control of the Election Commission of India, and they tell them, okay, this is not good, this needs to stop, because right now the Election Commission is keeping quiet.
Yes.
And things are going on. I mean, within 24 hours of a particular thing happening, a raid is conducted.
That's correct.
So is ED only watching this business?
So obviously it's acting under the direction of the government. But in that context, they froze a particular political party's accounts.
Yeah.
How do they run an election campaign?
I'm surprised that they're not bothered about the optics at all, because people can see that this is unfair, this is unjust, and it could have waited.
Yes.
I was told that one case is 39 years old, the other is 7-year-old.
Yes.
So again, whether there will be irreparable damage if it is delayed.
Right.
So that criteria is not met in this case. And finally, the fact that before the Supreme Court, the government said, okay, we will not take any coercive action. That was sensible. But that should have extended automatically to other cases also.
No, but the question is in the context of the point I raised, what about the Election Commission? Why should the Election Commission not take so to action?
Yeah, let me also mention, you asked that question. Actually, in the Model Code, one thing which people don't know, that Model Code is consistent with many laws of the land.
Right.
And while we take action under the Model Code, which is summary that we want your answer by tomorrow 5 o'clock, and they're so scared, by 4 o'clock the answer comes. We also file FIRs if a particular law is attracted.
Yes.
Secondly, in the last 10 years within this regime, once or twice it happened that using Article 324 for Model Code enforcement, they said that some leaders will not go in campaign in UP. That was a very bold decision, and it is not mentioned in the Model Code of Conduct.
Correct.
They use 324,
Yes.
so they can use 324 to make the Model Code stronger.
Let me just, in that context,
I just wanted to supplement what he's saying. See, the same argument could have been taken in 2019 about the film. Somebody could have said, like an ongoing case, the film was under production for so many months. We are just releasing it now. But the view that the Election Commission took was that the release, so the action of releasing the film is something which is going to disturb the level playing.
Yes, correct.
So the fact that a case has been going on for a long time, does it warrant that a critical action is taken which disturbs the level playing field at this point? I think that is a determination which the Election Commission must make.
Yes.
So I am not for a moment suggesting that structurally all agencies should be brought under the Election Commission.
That's right.
But they are within their remit
Yes.
to respond to a complaint of this nature and come out and say whether they believe that it disturbs the level playing field or it doesn't disturb the level.
In that context, this morning I read in the newspaper, I think I'm right, that Doordarshan is thinking of showing Kashmir files.
They've shown Kerala story recently.
Something or Kerala.
Yeah, they've already done
so
Kerala
now the question in this context, in the context of films, we know what impact that has. And you know the Dharam Sansads after March 16 are continuing campaigning and spreading hate, speech after speech that you cannot even, I cannot even quote it. It is so incendiary, right? And the kind of hate that it generates. And the Election Commission is quiet. Nobody is saying a thing. And this is going on after March 16. How does and this is not part of the Model Code of Conduct. After all, you can't control anybody. But 324 has that reservoir of
No,
power.
hate speech is covered under the Model Code.
Yeah, but what are they doing about it? Nothing.
But I think, I have made a suggestion in the past as well, that the reason why so many controversies and questions are raised, that needs a procedural solution. And that is that if all the complaints received under Model Code violation, they should be put on the website. And there should be a transparent system by which people can see whether a complaint has been made and how it has been disposed of. So today we are saying that if there is a complaint, EC will respond. We don't even know whether somebody has made a complaint. So why should you not have a public, transparent platform where people can see that there has been a complaint? This is what the Election Commission has done.
But courts sometimes act suo moto. I've seen courts acting suo moto in many cases. Why can't the Election Commission act suo moto when it sees something like this happening in front of its eyes? I don't think if the issue is of being partisan, if the Election Commission acts suo moto, in an extreme case, the people of this country will applaud the Election Commission.
I personally feel that nothing stops the Election Commission from taking suo moto action.
Right.
But as he said that otherwise they'll be flooded or will be accused of being partisan. And secondly, don't forget, opposition is always alert and they send a complaint within half an hour.
That is also
so I'm sure these complaints must have reached there.
Right. And then nothing is done about it. Let me switch on to another topic now, which is that the process of election or the election itself starts on the 19th of April, commences and ends on the 2nd of June. One election in this country now, has it ever been in the history of this country that election phases have been strung on for this long?
Yeah, this looks like the longest because 7-phase election has been the norm for the last 10-15 years for a good reason, which was valid till recently. But I have been writing about it for the last couple of years, not immediately provoked by what is happening now. That time has come for us to reconsider it. We were doing phased election only for safety of the voters and the staff.
Correct.
And which is why, and the paramilitary force which we ask for is limited. So we have to rotate them from one phase to the other to the third. And in any case, our effort even there was to keep the duration the lowest. We used to discuss how long will it take for them to pack up, move to the other station, unpack and take over. Our effort was to do it in 4 days, maximum 5 days. This time we find the minimum is 7 days and maximum is 12 days. So which frankly I don't understand what were the facts before the Election Commission, which we don't have because without knowing the facts, comment becomes a little...
Jharkhand has a 4-phase election.
Well, Maharashtra has 5-phase election. Jharkhand can
Four
understand. No, I would not mind Jharkhand having 7-phase election because Jharkhand has left-wing extremism.
Maybe so,
but
but that's
doing it in Maharashtra for that
5 phases.
5 phases.
And because Maharashtra is an extremely sensitive area in the context of the future.
Let me add, Kapil, why I've been writing for the last couple of years that we should reconsider this phased election. And I've even mentioned it that given the charge, I can do it in 33 days. All we need, the paramilitary forces that we get, their number should be given to us a much higher number in the first place.
Right.
Even if those forces are not. Now, the argument given is that when we take these companies, the paramilitary out, you are thinning the borders, thinning the sensitive areas.
Correct.
But you are doing it for 3 months.
That's true.
So I say that give us more force, but give me for only 1 month.
Correct.
So I think that
so
is
all this can be actually over in 1 month.
Also, yeah, that is one. And secondly, for another reason, why my suggestion was provoked, because in the social media explosion age, this is doing more harm than good.
That is true.
Because in 7 days, imagine how much of fake news, rumors, hate speech is spread, and riots can happen. So therefore, the time has come, and we should finish it in 1 day and come out, and you'll find the election much more peaceful.
Yeah, I think that you're right.
Can I broaden the picture
Yes,
a little?
yes.
First of all, the first election which was held in India in 1951, that was held in 62 phases.
68.
68.
Okay.
Thank you. And it spread over more than 4 months.
Right.
But that was not for want of availability of forces. I think there were different reasons for that. The fact that you need to phase out the elections, I think there could be some very good reasons why you need to phase out the elections. The possibility of conducting it or shrinking the duration, I think that is the real question. Whether you do it in 3 phases or 4 phases, but can you do it in a shorter duration?
Right.
And I just want to add here the fact that I have been Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Home Affairs. I was the first JSP2 looking after the deployment of paramilitary forces.
Okay.
So whenever there is this demand that is made on the Ministry of Home to spare paramilitary forces, there is a huge concern raised about where do you get these forces from? Because as we know that all these paramilitary forces, or CAPFs as they are called, except CRPF, all of them are border guarding forces.
Right.
So where do you thin and where do you draw these forces? I think that's a real issue, especially because the demand on paramilitary forces is increasing election after election.
Correct.
And Dr. Qureshi has several times said that chief ministers have demanded the deployment of paramilitary forces.
Right.
So I think that is a real resource consideration. I don't know whether it's a constraint, but it's a consideration.
Right.
But in this age of technology and in this age of modern systems of management and movement, I think it's a serious issue that Election Commission needs to consider whether they can do it quickly. I mean, why do you need to do it over 3 months?
Right. Well, that of course, that's a very big issue. But remember in the assembly election in West Bengal in 2021, it was done in 8 phases. Why in 8 phases?
No, there is a reason, because assembly elections of West Bengal and Tamil Nadu happened at the same time always. And ground reality is being different. West Bengal is done in 7 or 8 phases. Tamil Nadu is done in 1 phase, because the problems are different. There in Tamil Nadu, we have the money power, very serious. In West Bengal, they don't have that kind of money. But there, the problem of law and order, which is why traditionally we have been having phased election, all elections.
8 phases? I mean, surely you can reduce them to 3 or 4 or 5. Why 8 phases? Because that particular state is, from the point of view of political parties, they want every few days, election to take place so that the workers move from one to the other, and people who come from all over the country move from one. I think it has some political implications, which we are not realizing.
But time has come to reconsider that, as I've been saying, particularly because of the evil which social media can spread.
Correct, absolutely.
In fact, during the state election, I think the possibility of curtailing it
Yes.
is far more,
Far more.
because you can saturate the place with forces,
Absolutely.
the requisite number.
Right. And in October 2019, Maharashtra elections were held in one day. There was no phasing in October 2019. Haryana in one day. Jharkhand also, but Jharkhand was in larger phases. The point is that there is no rationalization. You know, it depends on the interest of the political party in power as to how they can be accommodated in the phasing of the election. That's my perception. I may be dead wrong, but that's what people of this country also feel. And that's unfortunate because it impacts on the credibility and integrity of the Election Commission. And if the integrity is in any way harmed, the whole process, I mean, that's
a serious issue.
It's a very serious issue. Now, let me move on to now another issue. Something that you mentioned, General. Now we see that suddenly overnight, thousands of people's names are removed from the electoral roll. Thousands. Right? People who are residing there for years, people who've got Aadhaar cards, and suddenly their names are deleted. They go to the polling station. It's happened in my own constituency when I was fighting from Chandni Chowk. And they say, we can't vote. Now, how does this work? I mean, how are the names deleted?
I think Dr. Qureshi and they would best answer. But the fact is, like, we get reports from our partners who are there in the states that this is happening. And they say these political parties, they have lists on which some color coding is done, and then certain names go.
Certain names belonging to certain communities.
Yeah.
That's the other worry. You know better?
Well, you know, we have been hearing about that. In fact, what surprises me, that the opposition parties who have been crying hoarse over EVM, which I have been defending.
But I'm going to raise that issue later.
No, yeah, you do. But what I'm saying is that the more important issue, the more serious issue is the manipulation of the electoral roll. Because election can be won and lost before the election through manipulation of the electoral roll.
In Telangana in 2019, 20 lakh voters' names were deleted.
And by the way, let me tell you, in defense of Election Commission is spent lakhs of rupees for 6 months, 1 year, advertising, please check your roll, please check your roll, please check your roll. And these days on WhatsApp group, some foolish thing is going on, that if you show Aadhaar, you will be able to vote, which is absolutely stupid. It is deliberately designed to mislead you and give you a sense of comfort. No. So listen to Election Commission's appeal, check your roll so that corrective action can be taken.
You must understand, these are people who are poor, they have no knowledge, they are not aware of these things, they have no access. Why can't you say that as of January, when you publish the electoral roll and the election is before June, that is the final roll?
That's a good point, good point. But the point I was making was, people may be poor and illiterate. What are the opposition parties, the political parties doing? Let them appoint observers, volunteers, to go door to door and see whether somebody's name has been struck off illegally.
But why can't the Election Commission say that on January 2 the roll is finalized?
That's a new idea and a good suggestion. Why not? Freeze it there so that the scope of deletion
doesn't happen.
Taken away.
I don't know if it's a practical idea, because, for example, now that you're having elections in April onwards, and if somebody has come to Delhi to work in February,
you can add names, but you don't delete names. That's the point I'm making.
You're only talking of deletion.
Yes, I'm talking about deletion. I'm not talking of addition.
Okay.
Because as you rightly said, somebody comes, he's an elector here, he should be allowed to vote.
What about people who are dead?
People are dead will be frozen. In any case, what these people do? They find out the streets where people are dead, then they go and vote on their behalf. And
although that should not be possible now, because the electoral roll has your picture.
It has your
and there are polling parties.
This happens after 5 o'clock.
No. But then, but the polling party agents are present. What is their job?
They are not. That's
if they are bought over by the opposition, how can we help?
I agree.
The person is supposed to carry a voter ID.
That apart, you may carry or you may not, because you can carry a 13 other.
No, it has a
but the fact that on the electoral roll your picture is there. if somebody says, "Okay, I'm Kapil Sibal," where
No, that's true.
So
That's true.
it's not possible.
No, it is not possible as long as the system works. It's possible if the system doesn't work. I can tell you that.
Yeah, but what
this is
if
a problem. This is a
the
problem.
party agents of the
Yeah,
opposition are bought over? How can we help?
That's
But a more serious issue with the electoral roll is the whole business of deduplication.
yes.
And I think there have been several efforts made for many years. Different softwares have been employed to identify. We are in a country where there are so many names which are so common.
Same, yes.
Father's name is common, etc., etc. So, Election Commission for many years has been trying how do you identify common voters.
Yes.
So, this entire exercise of deduplication takes place. Unfortunately, I think the citizens of our country, they don't think that it is their responsibility to get their name deleted if there is a duplicate entry. They think that the system will do it. If the system doesn't do it, we don't care. Whereas I think under the Act, it is their responsibility.
But it should be, the Election Commission should take note of it and do it on its own.
If you do it on its own, then there is a problem. In fact, the system does not even permit that if you have a death certificate issued, even that name cannot be automatically deleted by the Election Commission.
I see.
You have to go
And
issue a
have it.
notice and do a verification.
Very few people would do that actually.
So many provisions of different acts, they don't speak to each other.
That's a very interesting point. Well, let me move on to again something else that we talked about, and that is that we find that in many instances, names of not just minorities are deleted, but also the administration ensures that where the minorities are entitled to vote, they are not allowed to vote. I'll give you an example, and the example is Rampur Assembly constituency, and I'm talking of December 2022. Azam Khan was disqualified on account of his conviction. Voter turnout was 31%. 31%. And the BJP candidate won by 34,000 votes. And there are a total number of 3.9 lakh voters, of which 2.5 lakhs are Muslims. And yet, the total votes cast were 1,31,000. I was myself privy to images on the social media where policemen were deployed outside houses, not allowing electors to go out and vote. And the data that I have given you speaks for itself. What was the Election Commission doing? What was the Election Commission
comment to make. It's very shocking.
Oh, yeah, but this happened in Ghosi also.
And
People
there
were
were
prevented
complaints
to
made.
cast their vote.
And there were complaints made during the polling.
Yes, there were complaints made during the polling. Election Commission didn't do a thing. So what credibility then has that? If this is what's happening in our country, what's the credibility? So you threaten people, and that's why this whole hate agenda actually makes communities fearful that they will be subjected to violence, and therefore they voluntarily sometimes may not go and vote. So this is the negative impact of these kind of agendas.
But again, to speak for the Election Commission, I don't think that they are not cognizant of the complaints that are made.
Yes.
And they took this decision to implement what is known as the C-Vigil, Citizens Vigil,
Yes.
where anybody and everybody during the process of elections can actually upload a complaint on that app. And there is a system of monitoring. There is a protocol of providing a response in a certain number of hours on that. So that is as far as the system is concerned. And I think if you go to the Election Commission's website, they do publicize this data.
I'm sure if the system works, everything will be fine, but the system is not working. That's the sad part of it. And this has happened not just in one situation, in several situations I've seen that happening. And
basically, you see, so these systems are in place, but they're not functional.
that's what I was saying. They are not functional.
There's so many queries which we sent. Election Commission is like a black hole, no response.
Well, let me put it this way. Why are we having this discussion today? Because there is a feeling in the country, there is a perception that the Election Commission may not be performing its constitutional functions as it was expected to do. I never thought of this discussion 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I don't think anybody thought of this discussion because there was an element of distance between the ruling establishment and the Election Commission. Now you have a constitutional judgment of 5 judges of the Supreme Court saying that because under 324, the Commission has to perform a very, very sensitive function, right, to ensure free and fair elections. Let the body which appoints commissioners consist of the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and the Chief Justice of India. This judgment came, and suddenly you had an act passed by which the government said, no, we won't have the Chief Justice of India. We will have a nominee of the Prime Minister. So you have 2 against 1. So you can appoint anybody you want.
Actually, interestingly, the Supreme Court did not say that in the Act you make provision for collegium. They said, yes, pass an Act which has been pending for 70 years.
That's correct.
In the original draft, the collegium suggested did have Chief Justice.
Yes.
On second thought, 3 months later, they made 2-3 changes where it was removed. And optically, it is definitely bad because ab initio, it is 2-1.
Yes.
It makes mockery of a collegium system because the opposition leader is now 0.
The moment you have the Chief Justice of India, there is this confidence.
And quite right. And you will notice that in the last 10 years, this collegium with Chief Justice has been working in various posts.
Correct.
Not once anybody has raised question about those appointments.
Correct.
And not once has the Chief Justice differed with the Prime Minister.
Absolutely.
So where was the need to do this? You know, it is deliberate interfering with the optics that we don't care. Which is...
In fact, this is what I had written in an article which was published.
Yes, I read that, yes.
2 things which I pointed out. One is that if you see the Constitution, all the bodies which have been created in the Constitution willy-nilly depend on the government for their functioning,
Right.
except the Election Commission. And to a certain extent, the Delimitation Commission, which actually comes out of an act, it doesn't come out of the Constitution.
Right.
Election Commission's actions and their job has nothing to do with government functioning. It is between them and the voters.
Correct.
So, but more importantly, on this issue of appointment, this is exactly the point that if the Chief Justice of India has never ever deferred in any collegium, then why exclude? Because I think it is always better optically to have a broad-based selection panel.
That's true, and it happens in the case of, Lok Ayuks and everything.
By the way, let us remember the case is still in the Supreme Court, and the principle which it had enunciated was that it has to be acceptable and bipartisan.
Yes.
So bipartisan hasn't happened.
Yes,
So the act can still be examined.
The train would have run its course by the time the act is examined.
That's true.
So there's no point in this now, quite frankly. You can't wait for 2029 to have a nominee or to have the Chief Justice on the selection committee. Now let's talk of the actual election. When the election happens, in the age of digitization and the media, you have an election taking place in one district, say in 5 phases. That district is part of only 1 phase. The next district, next door, which is part of a phase that happens, a little later, the Prime Minister is making speeches, right? Now, this is clearly unacceptable. How does the Election Commission allow that?
I don't have an answer. Maybe Ashok.
No, I think they don't, they allow it.
Why?
Because it's not covered in the Model Code.
What does that mean?
So the point I
Again,
think which we need to consider is that is the Model Code only the responsibility of the Election Commission? Because let's not forget, it's some kind of a compact which was developed between the political parties. The responsibility of maintaining restraint is as much on the players as it is on the referee.
You're living in, this is not a utopian world. What responsibility are you talking about of politicians? Have you ever seen politicians discharging, I mean, especially in the midst of an election which is so volatile, that they restrain themselves? On the contrary, kind of see the language that is being used even today. Now, but the reservoir of power, and I go back to the same question, is the Election Commission under 324. They should say no speeches in that state while the phases are on, right? You can, within that phased area, you can make whatever speech you want.
But I don't, in this age of technology, if there is an election taking place in Sikkim, and if I make a speech in Kerala, it can still be transmitted.
But this is the problem, no?
So technically, can you block that?
You can technically block it, but at least this should be part of the model code of conduct, that no such speech which has the impact and interfering in the free and fair process of election should be allowed to happen. And many a time I remember that if you wanted to say something, you would, in the old days, we would have to tell the Election Commission what we are going to say. I remember when time was given to us.
But
it was cleared by the Election Commission.
it was.
Then we'd go to All India Radio and we'd make that speech.
But that is the ingenuity of the politicians, that you say something without crossing the boundary. So you violate the spirit, but you don't violate the letter.
But the spirit of the Constitution is the Election Commission of India. It should not violate the spirit of the Constitution. That I'm sure about. Now, let's go back to the EVM issue, in which you have always said. I'll assume now that the EVMs cannot interfere. Let's assume that they work perfectly. I'll assume that. But I am an elector. I want to know that when I cast my vote, that vote went into that ballot box, right? And it was counted towards the candidate in whose favor I cast that vote. Now, that responsibility is with the EVM and recorded. That responsibility is with the EVM, right? I have a fundamental issue about that. But let's come to a solution on this. I'll assume that EVMs cannot be manipulated. But once in the history of this country, let all votes in the EVM be counted with all the votes in the, VVPAT. Once only.
Yeah, quite right.
Only once.
Yeah,
right?
well,
Let it be counted, and then we make people of India are assured that in fact there is no manipulation. And once you do that, you don't have to do it again. What do you think of that solution?
Yeah, no, it's a very important idea. In fact, in 2009, when EVM opposition to EVM was at its peak, and it was opposed by the BJP no less, and they wrote a book, Democracy in Danger. That is when I called an all-party meeting, and all of them said, led by Chandrababu Naidu, that the issue of transparency. They said, we are not saying the results have been manipulated or will be manipulated in the future. All we are saying, it lacks transparency. When you press a button, whether it is going to the right destination, we don't know. Then we said, okay, tell us the solution. They said, introduce the VVPAT. We introduced the VVPAT. Now, VVPAT shows you on a screen that this is the guy you opted for. So, and the lakhs of slips have been counted and they have tallied. However, considering that people's faith in EVM and VVPAT has gone down,
Right.
I'm very worried about that.
Right.
It's easier to persuade political parties, but to change the opinion of the people. So, instead of all or nothing, I would say there are 2-3 things we can do simultaneously. In some places, let 100% VVPAT be counted. In some places, I have suggested that everybody in India loves cricket, DRS model, that only 2 appeals are allowed. If you tell the 2 runners up, because they are going to be the affected parties, that please put your hand on 2 machines about which you are suspicious. If we count the suspicious machines, we will be able to satisfy them. If you just randomly pick up 5%, that will not give you the result.
But why can't once all the VVPATs be counted? Once only, in one general. What's the objection to that?
I just want to know, what is the hesitancy from the part of
Yes.
the election commission?
No,
Is it
they
going to
have-
take
yeah,
too
correct.
much time?
The hesitancy they have said,
Is it
which I have
take too much?
completely rejected, they say it will take 5 to 6 days.
doesn't.
Which to me is the absolute rubbish, because I was a returning officer, Ashok was a returning officer in ballot paper days, newspaper size ballot paper, and the results were out in 16 hours.
Yeah.
And this is a small 3 inch by 3 inch slip, and it will take 5-6 days. So what are they saying?
It won't take 5-6 days.
They've also
will
said
take 5-6
it will
hours.
add to the expenses. I don't know how it will add to
In
the
fact,
expenses.
Kapil,
If you have a 1.5 month phased election,
Yeah.
it doesn't add to expenses.
No.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, the
correct.
logic doesn't
In fact, I have
hold.
also given another out of the box solution. If they say that it will take time, I'll know how to save time. Instead of counting the entire EVM which is shown and it takes the whole day, and then we recheck with the counter check with VVPAT, 5 machines, reverse the thing. 100% VVPATs counted, only 5% machines results displayed. It's the same cross checking. The time saved here is spent on VVPAT. But at least discuss it.
No, I think the point which emerges is that this entire methodology of election, voting, counting, is not fixed, has never been fixed. It keeps changing from time to time. There is an effort to improve it from time to time. The introduction of EVM, the introduction of VVPAT, 1 random counting, 5 random counting, these are all changes which have taken place with time. So I don't see why there should not be openness in considering
Yes.
that, yes, let us evolve another methodology.
Just do it once in one general election, and we'll be assured that there's nothing wrong with
And
the
it's
system.
more so because it's been specified that in case of a dispute, the actual ballot will be the VVPAT slip.
Yeah.
It has been
But
stated.
you have to file a petition.
No, I'm just saying.
No, what he's saying is that there is a provision that if there is a conflict, the VVPAT slip count will prevail.
Will prevail.
So, which
therefore-
means that the
therefore
greater
it is-
authenticity.
True, but then when all of them are counted together, no, that's only
That's what I'm
arises
saying.
then. And how that happens is you file a petition.
No, that I agree.
It's already there.
But
It is before the Supreme Court.
Supreme
is not.
Court, yeah, it
so
is.
let Supreme Court decide that 100% count will be done.
Yes,
Let's
I mean,
see.
that's,
At least
that's
it
all
is-
that we want. That's all that
let's
should
see. I mean,
happen.
it's after two weeks, it's going to be heard.
And
Right.
I also want to make one more point, that all the reforms that have taken place, not all of them have come from the brain of the Election Commission. They have come from outside. So I think all suggestions should be considered with an open mind.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Without attributing any prejudice or any motive to anyone.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I
See,
know
but
this.
now the Election Commission has not even agreed to meet the parties.
That's true. That is
I
true.
mean, how can
That also
at
is
least-
not acceptable.
you should
You know,
listen to
meeting
them?
parties, our
No,
door
no.
should be open 24/7.
Yes.
May I ask a simple question? Do the commissioners, even you and you, know what's in the system, what's the software, how it works, what's the technology? At least I don't know. Do you know? Who does all this?
No.
What's the source code?
Well, no, we don't know that source code or the software there,
Yeah.
but we have an independent committee of 5 IIT professors who know the job.
I'll give you 5 IIT professors who have said just the opposite. Should I give you? I have it with me. So, you see, election commissioners don't know these things.
No, but
I'm sorry to say.
no, but let me say that the technology is one part, and I think the credibility of the entire system
Is the other.
you need to assess both in terms of the technology as well as in terms of the probability of somebody manipulating the technology.
Yes.
And the arrangements which the Election Commission has put in place, and there is empirical evidence for that, that these arrangements are quite satisfactory.
Maybe so.
So the questions on technology are different.
Yes.
So there is a possibility of somebody manipulating
Yes.
the technology.
Yes.
There is a probability which you judge on the basis of all other arrangements which are in place.
My position is if there's a possibility, then you must at least once count it.
Yeah. Well,
If
yeah.
once there's a possibility.
That's a good-
Either you say it's not possible, you cannot say that. You cannot say that. As a matter of common sense, you cannot say that. Right?
No,
So-
I think you have to explore ways in which you can satisfy the people.
Satisfied. Okay. And people have to be satisfied. Wherever we go,
People have to be there.
people say that, look, ye to machine ka kamal hai. This is what happens. But anyway, let's move on. The last thing I want to touch, which I think is a serious bloomer of the Election Commission. is that the election process, the election starts on the 19th of April, ends on the 2nd of June. And as you know, there are two states in the northeast, Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim. Their term ends on the 2nd of June. And the Election Commission said that the votes will be counted on the 4th of June. I mean, how could the Election Commission miss that? You would have to impose President's rule.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm quite surprised that it happened, because this is the basic thing, very primary thing that we look at and work backwards.
Do you think they didn't do their homework?
No, I think there is a whole panchang, if you can call it, where you know which assembly's term is finishing when, and you work backwards, as Mr. Qureshi is saying. So I actually wonder.
And the other problem is that supposing something happens on the 2nd of June. Now they say the counting will be preponed to the 2nd of June. Now something happens in 7th of June, there's an earthquake happens, or something happens and you can't count. You'll have to impose President's rule. So you always must give yourself a cushion of about 7 days, so that if something untoward happened, you still have enough time to finish the process before the 2nd of June. And for a constitutional body to make such a bloomer is very unfortunate. But then we have hope. We have hope in the people of our country. We have hope in people like you. We have hope in the wisdom of our electorate, that all will be well in the end and the Republic will thrive in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.